Good evening. I'm Nick Voss, Education Outreach Coordinator with the Vadnais Lake Area Water Management Organization. And we're here with Bob Dahm. And we're going to talk about drought recovery and a whole bundle of organic lawn care options into fescues and bee lawns. Here's our outline. I'm going to go over some watershed basics as people keep logging in for the next 5 minutes, and then I'll hand it right over to Bob. The Vadnais Lake Area Watershed is just over 24 square miles. We cover this area outlined in black. We have White Bear Lake, Vadnais Heights, a little bit of Lina Lakes, and we are called a small watershed by definition. We have a lot of water to manage. The issues we work on as a watershed management organization include over-nutrification, excess nutrients in the form of grass clippings, but also all sorts of ways that nutrients get into our water bodies, such as erosion. We work on stabilizing slopes. We try to keep nutrients and sediment where it's at, and we try to keep rain from traveling very far. When you infiltrate rain where it's at, then we're helping the water quality throughout the whole watershed. We have areas that might be mowed down short all the way to a pond or a wetland or a water body. We encourage buffers and long-standing vegetation to be surrounding water bodies for protection. And the upper left picture there is a example for where the nutrients and where the sediment ends up. That's a storm outlet in the White Bear Township, and that stream of sediment at the bottom is coming from street level. And the end result in the water is something like that. So that's what we're trying to avoid. We take a lot of data at the watershed. We monitor every year from May to September. This is just a very small glimpse of that data. We have Secchi disc readings from the cleanest lake in our watershed to the most murky or the most eutrophied, the most turbid, different ways that we have the same way of saying it's murky and you can't really see. The deeper depth for Black Lake on the left is, you can see over 2 feet into the water column. Down at Tamarack Lake, you can't even see a ½ foot down. So as we do our Secchi disc and measure, this is an average of over 10 years of water quality data. That's a snapshot of the health of the watershed. And we have a Costshare grant program. We have ways to help residents, property owners, businesses install things like rain gardens, native vegetation, and on the right is an alternative lawn that is one of the no-mow type lawn varieties. So we help plan and we install and we get these practices on the ground. More information is at that link. We encourage a program called Adopt a Drain. Adopt a Drain is an easy way to help out a nearby water body. It's free, you opt in, and there's just a big community effort of thousands of people adopting storm drains right now in the Twin Cities Metro. Lastly, we have the Watershed Action Volunteers program. So I organize this and facilitate a group of volunteers. Every year we do different projects on the ground as well as education projects. And Vlamo.org/get involved can tell you how you can be a part of that. We'd be happy to see you and grow our team. So with that, that's all I've got, and I will hand it over to Bob to discuss the main event.
All right. Well, thank you, Nick. Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Dahm. I'm one of the owners of Organic Bob. We do organic lawn care and quite a bit with alternative turfs, and we have some small native gardens that we also put in with the goal of shrinking the lawn and getting rid of problem areas. And a little bit about myself, I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and that's our family picture. I'm the handsome guy on the with the striped suit coat on my dad's lap, and my mom was a school teacher, and she also was a soil conservation activist. So I would spend a lot of time waiting for my mom to get done talking about crop rotations and terracing and contour plowing, stuff like that. And then I watched my dad and my grandfather and many of the farmers I worked for in the summers die of cancer one after the other. And the only one of us kids that went into farming, my brother Pat on the far right of the screen, died of cancer 2 years ago. So I've got a fire in my belly about keeping things safe and protecting the land. So, and then years later, I was in charge of grounds for a children's psychiatric hospital, and the playground looked terrible because I was refusing to put any chemicals on it. So I started doing organic methods and products on it. And after 3 years, the playground looked better than the rest of the grounds that we were doing with conventional chemicals. And it was taking a lot less of our time in there because we had gotten the soil healthy. That was in 1986. So I've been on a quest ever since to improve things, make it more affordable, enhance performance, and so on. So next slide, please. So what I discovered in those 3 years at the hospital was if you get the soil healthy with a wide variety of a real diversity of soil microorganisms, and that whatever you grow in that soil will be healthy. And the things that weeds like is very different than what grass or trees or higher level organisms like. So what we do is we manipulate that soil microbiology to suit those higher levels. Next slide. And so this slide indicates the succession, ecological succession, if you will. So like bare rock on the left, and that can also be like after a forest fire or a major disturbance, like putting in a subdivision, things like that. And the soil microbiology on the left side has a lot more bacteria than fungi. And then as you move across, that reverses. And on the right side, you'll have a lot more fungi biomass in the soil than you will bacterial. And where those two meet, where they cross, is the line between weeds and grasses. So on the right side of the line with the grasses, the soil will be slightly dominated by fungi. And on the left side, on the weedy side, it will be dominated by bacteria. So, and what you do is you inoculate the soil with high quality compost or a compost tea, and then plant varieties of grasses that can handle the stressors, and you'll slowly crowd out weeds. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. So next slide, please. And here we go, arrested development. And this is very similar to what goes on in the soil. It's just crazy what you see in the soil when you look at it under a microscope. There's like a circus going on down there, and all the time. So next slide. And this is just one example. So the white background in that photograph is a little white feeder root of a plant. And the ropey looking stuff is of fungi. Fungi, the mushroom is the fruiting body of fungi, and that's above ground, but below ground, there's this network. And it really looks like a branching network all through the soil. And those fungi will colonize on a root of a plant, and they go into the pore, and they eat the carbohydrates that the plants put into the soil. So it's like they can say, Mr. Grass Plant, you need some calcium because your carbs are really weird today. And they'll go out and get calcium and bring it back with water and feed it to the host plant. And so these fungi are like having a smart root on the plant, and they connect with other plants. They go all through the landscape. They can stretch for miles in like a forest. So that's what we are getting to grow. And weeds, annual and biennial weeds, do not form associations with these fungi, not nearly as much as they do with like perennial, like grass. So next slide. Okay, so our grass species, there's none of them are from North America. There's one fine fescue that is, but they all come from places like Northern Europe or Northern Asia. And Kentucky bluegrass is from Northern Asia originally. And it was brought here as livestock forage. And they all evolved in climates like England, where they don't have our temperature extremes, and they get about twice the amount of rain we get. So if you're going to do a lawn and do it properly, it's kind of high maintenance. You got to mow it, you got to fertilize it because it wants really fertile soil, and it takes a lot of water. So you got to water it a lot. And, it's a lot more maintenance than, say, a perennial garden or native garden. So it's an artificial ecology that requires a lot of input. So next slide, please. So these are the things that grass needs: light, water, food, or nutrients. And we'll get into those now. Next slide. So shade grasses, in order to be thick and healthy enough to keep out weeds, need 4 hours of direct sunlight a day. And by direct, I mean you look at a white piece of paper and it hurts your eyes. And if it's not getting that, it's going to be thin. And the shade grasses should actually be more accurately named shade tolerant or sunshade mix. And the tolerant is the key word. And to illustrate that point, I can tolerate being underwater. I do not thrive there, but I can tolerate it for, a little bit of a time, or I need inputs like, a scuba tank. And that's the way grass is. It would prefer to be out in the sun at least 4 hours a day. 6 would probably be better. And so when that grass in the shade thins out, that's when you get creeping Charlie and other weeds, because nature doesn't like that thin grass. It's, they're going to put something there. So that's the story on sunshine for grass. And next slide. Watering is really important. And, water infrequently but deeply, but stop when it starts to run off. And you'll get roots that are quite deep. A little bit a day, or even the every other day watering, is not ideal. If you can get it an inch a week, and that includes any rainfall. So if you got 2 inches of rain last week, you're good for a couple weeks. And this is the way that grass develops the deepest root system, is you want to provide it enough water so that the water infiltrates, and then make the roots go after it, make them work and grow. So next slide. So fertilization is really important too. If you aren't fertilizing at all or very much, you're going to get weeds, because that grass needs that fertilizer in order to be thick and healthy enough to crowd out weeds. So many times I'll have customers say, my neighbor has all kinds of dandelions on their yard, and what's to stop those from coming into my yard? And the answer is really nothing, except if you have a thick, vigorous, healthy turf, those seeds don't even hit the soil. And if they do, they don't get the sunlight that they need to germinate. So you can really mitigate the effect of, neighbors' weed seeds on your lawn. Now, a runner like from Creeping Charlie, that's going to take a lot of vigilance, because that stuff just loves to come in. We do 2 fertilization a year, but we spread them out. We do it 4 times, and we do enough. So we also factor in leaving grass clippings on, and some of our lawns, people want us to seed in Dutch white clover, and we can back off in the fertilizer if that's there, because that will pull nitrogen from the air and put it in the soil. So there's a lot of ways you can pull back from the 4 and 5 feedings that you see here. So next slide. So now the topic du jour, the drought damage, and this is a picture of some pretty significant drought damage and just plain heat stress. Sometimes they'll turn like this and they'll recover, but last year it was so hot and so dry for so long that I knew we would be getting a lot of calls this spring about drought damage. So I put together this presentation, and then I trained our crew in how to deal with it. And the training I gave them, I'm giving you. So what happens in this is that the grass plant just kind of shuts down, it goes dormant, but then it starts to shed roots. And if it sheds too many, it can't regenerate the leaf. And so here you'll see those big brown areas, that's root damage. The areas where there's a little bit of green and kind of gray, that will regenerate. And you can notice here that in the shady areas, it's a little more green. And that many times is a good indicator that you have heat stress or drought damage. So next slide. So what happens in a drought? Now, there's on the left side, we have what happens, and on the right side, what you can do. So grass goes dormant. That means it's not growing. And so, don't mow it. And for sure, do not lower your mowing height because that exposes more soil. And every time you cut that blade of grass, it loses a lot of moisture until it heals that. I have a customer, or we have several customers actually, that didn't mow their lawn. I think they maybe did it 3 or 4 times last year. And their lawns look just lush and green, even through the hottest part of summer. So another thing that happens is microbes will close the soil pores Have you ever seen that, like the slime on an earthworm? And that's what microbes do. They produce that and they plug up the soil with it. So they, it's like close the doors, don't let the heat in, and don't let the water out. So when you're watering, then you need to wet the soil, like maybe let the sprinkler go for 10 minutes and then stop for maybe a half hour and then start watering again. And what that does, that dissolves those plugs. So it allows the water to flow in. If you don't, you're going to get to the runoff point much quicker, and the water won't soak in. And one thing I noticed this spring when we had the rains and the snow melt, there's a creek by our house, and I didn't see that creek rise very much this year. And past years, it would rise up quite a bit. And I think the soil was just so low in moisture, it soaked it up. And a lot of it was infiltrated, which is good because after a drought year like that, your subsoil moisture gets depleted. And then that causes trees and other plants to get more surface roots. And then they're competing with the grass for it. And only one thing's going to win that fight, and that's the tree. Grass will be hurt. Another thing that happens is soils become hydrophobic, so they'll shed water. And that's partly because of they just, the pores get plugged up by the microbes, but the soil itself just gets a glaze on it. And the water just won't soak in very fast at first, and then eventually it will. But it's like you take an old sponge that's really dried out and put it under a faucet. The water just beads right off it at first, and that's the same thing there. So an exposed soil heats up and dries out. So again, thin areas of lawn where there is soil that gets exposed, or if it's mowed very short, and I'm talking less than 3 inches, it's going to heat up and dry out, and that stresses the grass plant, and it goes into dormancy much quicker, and then starts losing roots and dying. So again, don't mow. And then another thing that happens is weeds that like it hot and dry start showing up. And we had so many strange weeds that popped up in people's lawns last year, and they'll just sit there until the conditions are right, and then they pop up and bloom and go to seed, and they're almost like a desert plant. Crabgrass really loves hot and dry. It needs 5 consecutive nights of soil temperatures above 70 degrees in order to break dormancy and germinate. And those crabgrass seeds can remain viable for like 100 years. So we got that going for us. And the thing is that crabgrass likes it hot, dry, low fertility. So if you mow high, you're shading the soil, you're keeping it cool, and that alone can suppress a lot of crabgrass. But then if you water and fertilize, you're suppressing even more. But some areas, like along a curb or a sidewalk or driveway where it gets really hot, crabgrass is always going to come up there. So your best bet is to follow an organic program, and we'll get to that more later. So next slide. So drought recovery and repair. Excuse me. So the first thing you want to do, and that would be like in a week or two here, mow it short and bag the clippings, rake up any loose clippings. You want to expose the soil and so that you can put the seed down. And slit seed, it's a piece of equipment. It's a lawn dethatcher with a seed box on it. So it cuts these little slits in the soil and drops the seeds. And you want to slit seed with a low maintenance grass seed blend, fertilize, and then top dress with a quality compost before mid-May. And it's going to be a little touch and go this year because it's staying cold so long. You know, we're 2 weeks behind last year already, but that will be your best bet to getting that lawn reestablished. And if there's weeds that show up, you can pull them or treat them with Weed Slayer, and that's an organic herbicide that I'll talk about later, and just do that before seeding. And then you water it up to an inch a week, including the rain. Now, if we get some really warm, dry weather, you'll want to water those new seedlings. Just keep them moist 15 minutes a day for the first couple weeks, and then taper them off, go every other day and every third day. And then all the while doing this inch of water a week. And then mow it at 3 inches or higher. And you can raise the mower blades to get weed heads if it's like last year. You don't want to lower the blades at all, but if you want to knock the weed heads off, you can do that. So next slide, please. Okay, this is a picture of a slit seeder, and they're available at most rental places. And it gives you really good seed to soil contact, and it will kick up some debris, some clippings that you'll have to rake up afterwards, but it's a great tool. And there's other ways of doing it too, and that's the next slide. Okay, this actually is what it looks like. Now, the way you slit seed, you want to go put half your seed down going north and south, and then go east and west. So you'll end up with this checkerboard pattern, and that will blend it better. And if you're doing a dead area that's surrounded by green stuff, go into the green areas a little bit, maybe a foot or two. That will help blend it in more also. And then save a little seed for areas that the machine can't reach, like you won't be able to get close to a sidewalk or in a tight corner. So next slide. Manual seeding, you can just take a hard rake like this and use that to expose soil and remove the debris. And again, you mow short and bag the clippings, and then apply the seed, fertilizer, and compost and water it in. So that's for smaller areas, or if you don't want to mess with renting a machine. So next slide. Now, what kind of grass seed? Now, these fescues are the lowest maintenance grasses that we have. Now, the fine fescue is the stuff that they sell us as shade grass. It's that finer, wispier grass. And it takes about half the water and 2/3 of the fertilizer of Kentucky bluegrass. And if you don't mow it, it takes even less fertilizer and no water. And it looks kind of fun. It grows like 6 inches long or so, and then it lays over and it doesn't grow anymore. And it looks like guinea pig hair. You just have these swirls, and it's really good looking. And it's so low maintenance. And you mow it a couple times a year, like once in the spring and once in the fall, to do some maintenance on it. You just seed and fertilize, but it's great. we have done a lot of these and people are really happy with it. And in fact, we overseed lawns as just a part of routine maintenance. And this is the grass seed we use just because it takes so little water and so little fertilizer. Another good candidate is a tall fescue. And it looks very similar to Kentucky bluegrass. And it gets less water and fertilizer. And it gets 30-inch deep roots. So those two, you're going to have a really bulletproof lawn when it comes to a drought if you manage it right. And there's other grasses. Twin Cities Seed has some that are they're low water use certified. There's a name for it, but some kind of a water efficiency standard that they adhere to. So blends with that. And we have a blend that's fine fescue and tall fescue and a little bit of that bluegrass in. And it works great. So next slide.
Real quick, I actually like to call these like a Dr. Seuss lawn sometimes.
Yeah.
But I like guinea pig hair. That's a great visual too.
And they're really good if you have an area like, a steep hill, something you don't want to mow. I mean, they're great.
Yeah.
So top dressing, I talked about top dressing as part of the thing to do with a drought repair, and 140 pounds of quality compost, or 520 if you're doing a renovation per 1,000 square feet. So we do about 12 bags, and that's about 400 pounds. So we're kind of middle of the road, but if you're doing it yourself, it's a little more affordable. If you're hiring somebody like us to do it, it gets expensive. So we try to temper that cost with using less material. And the compost, I can't stress enough how important it is to use good compost. What you're doing, you're putting down some organic matter, but you are also putting down the microbes, the beneficial soil microbes, and a lot of that is dependent on fungi. So these are 3 brands, Sue's, Cosmo, and Soil Essentials are really good bagged composts. You can get the Cosmo delivered in bulk, and Sue's and Cosmo are from Wisconsin, and Soil Essentials is up kind of close to St. Cloud, and they're really good. We've looked at them under a microscope, and they all have really good biology, and you can't go wrong with any of them. And you can do it in this spring and fall your first year, and then maybe in the fall the second year, and after that you really shouldn't have to do it because it's a lot of work. I think we have a video on our website or on our YouTube page that shows how we do it. And then I would caution people about using city compost. They just aren't composted very well, and you won't be getting very good quality, and you could be spreading weed seeds or jumping worms, things like that. So just be careful. Next slide. Okay, so fertilizer, excuse me. We're required to use phosphorus free unless you're starting from bare soil. And the phosphorus is the middle number. You can see it kind of towards the bottom. It's 484, and it's right underneath the word overseeder. And the first number is nitrogen. The second number is phosphorus. and the last number is potassium. So what you need if you're just doing maintenance is something that has a 0 for that middle number. And I would always look for an organic certification seal also. And if you are starting from bare soil, then you could use a fertilizer like this that has that middle number. And this is a good brand, Sustain. It's local. They're made down by Cannon Falls. And I've started using this in '86, and I think they started making it in like '82. So we've been together a long time. And do not use Milorganite. It's sold as an organic fertilizer, and it is not. It is human sewage from the city of Milwaukee, and it's been composted, so it doesn't have a disease risk. But there are a lot of contaminants, heavy metals, and PFAS and other chemical contaminants in it. And they're, city of Milwaukee only produces so much, so they blend it with synthetic fertilizers. So it's terrible stuff. Just don't use it. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about the lawn care. And this really is important to the organic or to the drought recovery, because organically managed lawns tolerate and recover from droughts much, much better than a chemically managed lawn. So next slide. Grubs, the last 4 or 5 years have been like a biblical apocalypse for grubs. Just terrible. And there are organic treatments. Milky spore disease is one, but it only affects Japanese beetle grubs. And it is not that effective at managing Japanese beetles in your yard because they can fly in from anywhere within half a mile. But there's a product, Grub Gone, and it treats all grubs. There's about 14, I believe. And it will also it comes in a form called Beetle Gone, and that one you can use to treat Japanese beetles. And I did a lot of research on this one. I vet stuff really carefully, and it only targets grubs and beetles, not bees or butterflies or anything else. And it's organic, and it's so safe that you can spray raspberries with it, go in and harvest and wash them and consume them on the same day. So it's a form of BT, Bacillus thuringiensis or something like that. It's a variety that only attacks grubs, and it doesn't go after anything else. So in this particular yard, the grubs killed all the grass, and then raccoons and crows and possums and skunks all came in and dug up the dead grass to eat the grubs. And this thing looks like we tilled it, and the green stuff you see around the outside is crabgrass. So it was in bad shape. I should have gotten an after picture of it, but we didn't. So next slide. Yeah, and here's the Grub Gone. And I have the source for it later in the resource slides. So next slide, please. Yeah, crabgrass, as we talked about, it's, it can be tough to deal with, but you fertilize, water, mow high, and you'll get rid of the majority of it in a couple years. Next slide. Creeping Charlie. Now, every weed is a sign of soil problem, and Mother Nature uses these weeds to fix the soil problems that are in the way of that ecological succession. And if you remember the slide that had the bare soil on the left and the climax community, the rainforest on the right, and this is how Mother Nature fixes things in the soil. So that creeping Charlie, it will, if you leave it alone long enough, it will fix the pH and the calcium deficiency. So next slide. Dandelions, they indicate compacted soil and pH. It's in our area, it's usually skewed to the, actually it's skewed either way, either acidic or basic. And, it uses that taproot and it drills down in the soil and it'll break up the compaction. And if you leave it alone for 1,000, 10,000 years, it will do a lot of good in the soil. But I don't have that kind of time, so we'll just bypass that. Next slide. So weed therapy, this is what we do. Excuse me, this is what we do when we come across like a patch of weeds in somebody's lawn when we're core aerating. And we'll, if it's like clover or creeping Charlie, we'll use a rake to pull them out, or we hand pull them, and then we'll deep aerate with a shovel. And that's just taking a shovel and pushing it in the ground as far as you can. You wiggle it back and forth to make it like a slot. And you do that every square foot. And then we'll top dress with the compost. Then we'll overseed and apply organic fertilizer. And we do have YouTube videos about this on our website. And yeah, so next slide. This product, it's a German company, and they, Canada outlawed all lawn care chemicals a number of years ago. And this is one of the very few that are approved for use there. And it's very low toxicity. It's safe for aquatic invertebrates. The active ingredient is chelated iron. The grass will actually green up when you put this down, because grass uses iron to improve its photosynthesis. And it will kill all broadleaf weeds. And when creeping Charlie is running in your yard, you can, when it's blooming in the spring, you do 3 applications 3 weeks apart. This product is available at Gerton's, and I think on Amazon too. There's a link to it on our website. We've got a product page that usually links you up to where you can buy it online. And but the way you apply this is the creeping Charlie, for example, has a leaf that's a little bit cup shaped, and you want to fill that cup up. You apply it to the point of it running off the leaf, and then you move on to the next one. So it takes quite a bit of product, but it's very effective. And it's actually a little bit more effective than chemical stuff when it comes to creeping Charlie. And this is a similar regimen that you use when you are using chemical herbicide on creeping Charlie. There's several applications. This stuff's hard to kill. So next slide. Okay, the most organic lawn and drought-proof lawn may be the one you remove. So on this slide, this is a before and after, and back close to the house, it was really too much shade for grass to do well, and it was a very steep slope. And then as you come closer, next to just on the other side of that rock strip, you can see it's browning out and it's still pretty steep. Now, grass doesn't do well on a steep slope because the water doesn't infiltrate. It just really needs a lot of water, and it doesn't get it on a steep slope. And then here in the foreground, it's just getting baked by the sun. So these people just opted to go with the prairie, and it looks a lot better, and it much lower maintenance. An acre of turf grass costs about $5,000 a year to maintain. An acre of native plants costs about $1,000 a year to maintain, and that's if you maintain it. So, there's yeah.
I was just wondering, does that include a time estimate for for your labor to a cost value or just product?
It was a study done by a guy that owns some warehouses, and I forget his name, but he was, hiring people to do it. So it'd be like a commercial lawn care company and then a commercial prairie management company. And I think his numbers were like 5,200 to 1,250 or something like that. So there's a lot of difference. And with gas prices going up and energy prices, the lawn's only going to become more expensive because synthetic fertilizers have a tremendous energy footprint. Those big reactors that they use to pull nitrogen out of the air just really use a lot of power. So, next slide. So if you want to replace an area of your lawn, it died out in the drought or it's weedy or whatever, these are the steps that we use, and we'll remove vegetation and debris, with a sod cutter or whatever, and then we'll till in a quality compost. And again, 12 bags per 1,000 square feet would be enough. And then we grade the soil by hand. We'll apply a starter fertilizer, and then and the starter fertilizer is the one that has the phosphorus in it. And then we'll sow seed and lay sod, and we'll mulch the seed with pellets, or if it's a slope, we'll use blanket. And then we'll just water until the turf is established. And that's different for seed versus sod. Sod, you just soak it and soak it and soak it. Seed, you keep it moist and soak it occasionally. And both of them, you want to wean them off the water slowly. So next slide. So this is a lawn that we did from seed. The picture on the left is right after we had put straw over the seed. And this is in the backyard looking to the house. And then on the other side, we're at the house looking in the back. And it was maybe a month and a half later. So the seed filled in really nicely, and it's no fescue. And you can see that I think it's October in that picture. So it's about a month and a half later. And it filled in really good. And, like many of our customers, we worked ourselves out of a job. I think we might do some maintenance on this, which is like a couple visits a year, because you get that soil biology going, and it doesn't take very many inputs to keep it going. So seed is very successful, but there's two things I tell people whenever you seed from bare soil. Number one, you're going to get weeds, and you need to have a plan for that. Number two, you're going to have to touch up that seeding for the next year at least, maybe two. That's just the nature of the beast. So next slide. Now, if your lawn is okay and you just want to try to fix it up, these are what we do. And we do this in August and September. We may do a dormant seed, and we might do it in the spring. But mow short, bag those clippings, deep aerate by hand or machine. I really don't like doing that in the spring. So I wouldn't, unless you have a real weedy area, and then I would just do it a little bit by hand. Top dress with the quality compost, put down the right fertilizer, the phosphorus free, and then your grass seed blend. And then the best time is August through mid-September. And then you can do it also in spring, like we're talking about for the drought repair. You can also do it in late October to mid-November. And that, if you're going to do a bee lawn or native plants, that's when you do it, because they need the winter cold in order to break dormancy. So next slide. This is Weed Slayer, the product I was telling you about earlier. It kills everything you spray it on. It's non-selective, and it's organic. The active ingredients are clove oil and molasses and a bacteria that moves those ingredients from the leaf to the root. And they were certified organic, and they were stealing a lot of business away from Monsanto in the wine country in California. It costs about a third of what Roundup costs, and it was organic. So somehow the state of California, the Department of Ag, got samples and they tested them, and they were shown to have glyphosate and diquat in them. And so the manufacturer lost the organic certification, and now there's a class action lawsuit against them. But I still promote them because the California Department of Ag tested the same samples again, and there was no contaminants in it. And I get it from two different suppliers. They both have sent samples in to be tested, and they were clean. The manufacturer in Florida, the Florida Department of Agriculture came and tested every lot that they had ever made, and they were all found to be clean. So it's just, some industrial espionage or sabotage going on. And I do not doubt that there was some dirty pool going on, and I've had it, going by my my suppliers saying that they tested it. So I'm very confident in the safety of this product. And this kit comes with citric acid to get the pH of the water where it needs to be. And then it's the 2 parts, because the bacteria, you have to mix it right before you use it. So I think this kit costs $100, but it's enough to do, 5 acres or something like that. It's quite a bit. So it's a good product, and it comes with a sponge applicator, so you can just spot treat it on your grass, and it will kill the weed in a little patch of grass, but nothing else. So it's certified organic, or will be soon. So that's that product. Next slide. Now, this is a monthly program that I recommend people follow if they want to do the organic. And many times people will, we can sell the materials for this, a DIY, and deliver it, or you can go to garden center and get the stuff, whatever you want to do. And then many times we will come out in May and June and August and September and apply compost tea, which is, like a concentrated liquid solution of beneficial soil microbes. It just speeds the process up a bit, but it isn't necessary. In fact, I did this business for 20 years without compost tea, but I like it. So that is an option for people. And yeah, so hey, Nick, I have a question. Are these slides available for people? Because I see people taking a lot of notes. Would we be able to email out these in a form of a handout or post them?
I'll try to post them as a PDF on the website, and then I'll give that a link to direct download it. Sending the slideshow itself was pretty big and
Yeah.
cumbersome. So I'm pretty sure it'll work with the link it to the website, and then you can pull it off the website with my follow-up email.
Yeah. And if people can't get it that way, they can always email me and I can email out. Like I put them into handouts, 6 slides a page, and then send them out as a PDF.
Oh, there you go.
But your way sounds better.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I
just
can't
feel
see
bad.
anybody, so thanks for catching that.
Yeah, I feel bad because I know a couple times people were writing like crazy, and then we had to move on to the next slide. So,
Oh yeah.
And let's do that now. Next slide, please. So grass garden, if you're very intentional about it and think of your lawn as a grass garden, you have certain things you do in your perennial garden and your veggie garden, and a lawn is much the same. That inch of water a week, mow it 3 inches or higher, and mulch those grass clippings, and keep the mower blade sharp, and then follow an organic program, and you will end up with a very healthy lawn with very few weeds, a manageable number of weeds. Yeah, it's nothing real complicated. It's a lot of work, but it's not real complicated. Oh, next slide, please. So this is what you can expect. We tell people it takes 3 years to get their lawn up to a point where they're going to be happy with it, and it's going to be low maintenance. And it takes 2 years for weed control if the program is followed. And being able and willing to supplement up to an inch of water a week. And year 1, you'll notice the grass is thicker and greener and healthier. Year 2 is there's a little bit fewer weeds and more grass. And then year 3, you'll notice even more gaining ground on weeds, and you can back off on watering, on fertilizer, top dressing, and overseeding. So we have, we're just doing it this year. It's a 3-year contract, and we price stuff for people. Year 1 for a small lawn in South Minneapolis is about $1,400. Year 2, it's about $1,000, and year 3, it's about $400, and every year after that, it's about $400. So once you get that soil going and it's healthy and it has a lot of microbial diversity and high populations of those microbes, it's really simple. I mean, there's fungi that produce organic acids, and they dissolve solid rock matter, and that supplies all the trace minerals and nutrients. And there's bacteria that will pull nitrogen from the air and put it in the soil. So, it's almost like you're setting up a little fertilizer manufacturing plant in your soil. So it's a lot of fun. Next slide. Now, this is a huge lawn up in Rogers for some customers of ours. And this is the third year of a do-it-yourself lawn. We had to look to find that stupid dandelion that's in the picture there. And this is a young couple. They have a couple kids. They have a dog that likes to run away. And both husband and wife are in wheelchairs. And they are an absolute inspiration to me. But they do all of this work themselves. And they have an irrigation system, but their lawn just looks great. And it's just, I mean, I'm just always amazed when I see this picture. So next slide. Okay, here's a picture of the Nomo fescue. And you can see it's just laying over. It looks like waves on the ocean or something, but and if you want, you can mow it, treat it like a regular lawn. But if you do it this way, you use very little fertilizer and almost no water. So next slide, please. This is a bee lawn. It was developed by the U of M Bee Lab. It's the fine fescue like you saw in the previous picture, but it also has Dutch white clover, self-heal, and creeping thyme in it. And they did it. It's just a wonderful project of helping these isolated bee populations hook up with other bee populations. There are bees that their range is like a quarter of a mile. And so you get out in suburbia, like we're, that lawn with the one dandelion, the big one. And I tell you, there's hardly anything for a bee to eat in that landscape because all the lawns are like that. But here, and so what happens in those deserts is that these tiny bees, they get isolated and they lose genetic diversity and they die out. So these bee lawns are a way of helping bees hook up and connect these populations so they can stay viable. Next slide, please. Okay, here's some of the resources. Fertilizer, look for that organic certification seal, and you only need half an application in the spring and 1.5 in the fall. The reason I do half application in spring is the lots of nitrogen in the spring will cause weeds. You get that fast growth, and it's why feed the weeds? So, and then seed, just use quality seed from a reputable supplier. And the seed, look at the content on the thing, on the box, and many times in big box stores, it'll say, 4% NS, not specified. And that's when you get in the weird varieties of weeds, the golf course weeds, I call them. And it's just grass like beck grass and annual bluegrass. They will actually, they can make your lawn look like it has a disease. The annual bluegrass does, because it browns out in summer. And the others just form these colonies, these patches in your lawn, and they're different looking. And those are usually because somebody bought cheap seed. And compost, again, look for organic certification and don't use municipal or homemade, not on lawn anyway. And herbicide, there's no organic herbicide that won't also kill grass. Fiesta you can use, but it isn't organic. But it is a lower toxicity. It's regulated as a biopesticide and not a hazardous material. So that's product resources. And a good brand of seed. Twin City Seed is a good supplier. And you can, and also places like Gerton's, the bigger greenhouses and stuff, they carry good stuff. JRK, I think which is owned by Gerton's now. Twin City Seed, Ramey is a good one, although they don't sell a lot to homeowners. Twin City Seed, you might be able to call them and you might be able to buy it online. I know you can get their B-lawn seed online. So yeah, just shop around a bit. Next slide, please. Okay, the Grub Gone is at greenearthagandturf.com. Weed Slayers All States Organic Supply. Fiesta, Gerton's, and Amazon. Ringer is a good fertilizer. It used to be locally made, but it's been around for a long time. Cosmo Compost, bulked and bagged, and Mississippi Topsoils Premium Compost is bagged, and that other one, Sue's, HSU''S. That's also a good one I should have on there. Next slide. And then information resources. Organic Lawn Care Manual by Paul Tukey is a really good resource. And then if you want to, reduce your lawn, my friend Natalie Shandstrom with Pask Design will do good for you. And organic lawn care information, there's us, organicbob.com, and then bluethumb.org, Rain Gardens Alternative Turfs, does all kinds of stuff through Blue Thumb. And next slide. Okay, I spoke at the beginning about losing my dad and grandpa and my brother to cancer. And this is my daughter Isabel a number of years ago with her cat Curiosity and her dog Morgan. And I asked Isabel, I said, "Hey, Isabel, do you like that we do organic lawn care?" Figuring she didn't even know. And she just enthusiastically said, "Yes, Dad, I love it." I said, What? That strong reaction for a 10-year-old. Why do you feel so strongly about that? And she goes, "I can play in the yard with Morgan, the dog, and she won't get sick." I said, "Well, that's nice, honey, but what about Curiosity, the cat?" And she says, "Cats don't care, Dad." So out of the mouths of babes. So, my daughter, I never felt bad about her playing in our yard, although her grandparents' yard was another story. So that's the end of the presentation. I think there might be one slide after this. Oh, yeah.
It's just opening up for questions.
I saw some in the chat.